Either
Yeah.
way. Sweet. Well, how's your Thursday going so far?
Thursday's going good so far. We got football. Football's
I
back today.
saw that. I don't know what football is, but
Go
just kidding.
sports. Go
Just
sports.
kidding.
Um,
You.
no, Thursday's good. Off to a good start. Got a little team meeting coming up here later, but no complaints here. But should get a little bit better talking rental properties. I know a lot of people
Yeah.
know about it.
Yeah. This will be a good one.
Yes. Um, I guess how do we want to dive in? I actually, funny enough, I made a YouTube video. I never posted it yet. I have it because I hate editing. But I did the exact thing of this conversation a few weeks back, so I'm primed and
Nice.
ready. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, if you have anything that you want to start off with, that's fine. I think most of the questions that I receive do have to do with like the financing side of things.
Mhm.
So maybe we can start off with that and then kind of go into what kind of things you want to look like. And then maybe like the money that you're making off of it, what's a good amount of money to be making off of a rental property, those kinds of things. So, yeah, maybe
Okay.
get dive right into the finances and then
All right. So I guess just looking at the finances, because usually you get a primary residence. Nowadays, especially if you've owned a home prior to 2020, it makes a lot of sense if you're up and ready to take on a rental. It makes sense to keep that property and make it some sort of a rental. Um, that being because your mortgage is so much cheaper because of the purchase prices that you were able to obtain pre 2020. So if you're able to hold on to that home, let it keep appreciating, and then you're able to put someone in there who's going to basically pay your mortgage, that makes a lot of sense.
hmm
I wish I could have done it in my personal situation during the move. The numbers didn't make sense,
yeah.
but I plan to with our next home. Um, but ultimately understanding like if you had that home before 2020, it makes a lot of sense, long-term or Airbnb. So that being said, going and just looking at the two types of rentals that we all know, either short-term or short-term in like Airbnb is what
hmm
people say, and then a long-term rental, which is more of a traditional, put a renter in there, long-term, year, month to month, whatever.
Yeah.
Just looking at the finances there, starting with down payment. So technically you're purchasing a short-term rental as a second home. You're purchasing that as a place you're going to spend the number is 14 days out of the year. That's all you have to do. That's the amount of time you have to spend there in your second home. But while you're not there, that's where that short-term rental comes in. You're able to rent it out while you're not there, and that's a 10% down payment. So that's always seen as very achievable for people that don't want to go and put 15 to 25% depending on
Right.
property type for a long-term rental. So it's much more attainable. Um, but that being said, a lot of people aren't aware that when it comes to a second home, you go, oh, I'll have short-term rental. I'll have income coming in. It'll outweigh, or we can negate, or whatever the mortgage, and that's not the case. You have to afford both your primary and second homes altogether without taking in any other income. Your main source of income has to cover both.
Mm.
So that's a common misconception. I've also had people ask questions of, are you sure we can't count? I'm like, yes, I'm sure. That's the beauty of the long-term rental, is leveraging the debt. Second home, you can't use that potential income to qualify.
Okay.
Uh,
I did not know that. So that's good. That's good information.
and then to go off of that, there's so much up here. To go off of that, if you report that income that you've made, let's say you buy the property, after 2 years of reporting the income you brought in on your tax returns, then we're able to count that income going forward, and then that's when you're able to kind of leverage the income to the debt that you have. But it
Got
takes
it.
2 years of tax returns to show the total profit and a working number we can use.
Hmm. Good to know.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, long-term rentals, uh, these are like I said, you put a renter in there, and if you were to purchase this straight up as like a rental, typically you're putting 15 to 20% down for a single family house, and if it's a multifamily unit, it's 25%.
Okay.
So there's significant numbers. They're very like double
Yeah.
second home in most cases. But the beauty of rental homes is that you can count 75% of the expected rental income. An appraiser goes out, does a rent schedule, And then you're able to leverage all immediately potential income coming in from that property at 75% to of the total mortgage cost that you're going to have to take on. So if
Yeah.
you have the funds, that's where having a long-term rental makes sense financially, and the finances behind getting a loan and everything. So that's kind of like the pros and cons to each, just the flip flop there. But I mean, it always comes down to personal preference. There's some
Yeah.
people that go, I want a second home. I don't plan to buy another one after this. So if it's like a vacation home and I get to rent it out, cool, I'm done.
Yeah.
But some people like to leverage and continue to leverage, so they'll buy long-term rentals and expand their portfolio.
Yeah.
Just depends on what you want to do with your life and financial outlook.
Definitely. What
Yeah.
do rates look like when it comes to, not like specific rates, but are they the same or are they different than buying
So
a primary residence?
yeah, so secondary homes and long-term rentals are significantly more expensive. And when I say expensive, I just mean it's a higher rate and
Sure.
there's a little bit more cost to get there. For reference right now, again, I'm not quoting anyone, but like if you were to do a primary residence, you're probably somewhere in the sixes. If you're buying it as like a first-time home buyer, lower down payment, you're somewhere in the sixes. Um, for a conventional loan on a second home or a rental property, you're looking at about 7% right now is about the max, right around 7% of what you can do. And even then you have to buy points to get to that point.
Sure.
So it's very expensive right now to do that rate wise. And it's always more expensive to do a second home and investment property than it is to do a primary. And with that, to kind of go into this next little layer of it, when I mentioned early on of like, hey, if you have a primary residence and you're going to be moving and you've lived there for a year and you're more than like early 2020, if you're able to put a renter in there and you can take it on, you're going to have a cheaper rate than you would have trying to buy a new investment property.
Right.
So a primary residence, live there for a year and turning it into a rental is always the way to go if you're conscious about what's the lowest rate I can get for an investment property. It means taking the year to live there and then converting it after the year.
Yeah. We talk a lot about sometimes doing like short-term sacrifices. And I think that sometimes is a sacrifice that some people will need or will want to make in order to make things a little bit less expensive on themselves is taking a year living in that property and then moving forward to the next property.
100%. And then same thing goes for if you were to use an FHA loan and buy a duplex and live in the duplex.
Right.
You go 3.5% down, but there's a year sacrifice of living there before you can put a second renter in there to take your place.
All right. Hypothetically speaking, let's say somebody buys this house, says they're going to live there, and then turns around and rents that unit out. What are the repercussions for that?
Well, that is mortgage fraud, and that is a federal offense. And then I actually, again, still learning. I actually learned this from another LO on TikTok. If it is found out that is what happened, I don't know, and I won't talk on like what's the process of how people would find out, but if you're legitimately buying into a primary residence and there's renters in there within the first month, someone's going to find out and it's mortgage fraud. The lender can call the note due or the mortgage due, and you owe that entire amount back
Immediately.
If it is found out you've committed mortgage fraud, and then you have to deal with it's a federal offense, and then you have to deal with
potential jail.
Whatever the exact punishments may be, but yeah, you owe the money back, which then you're like, okay, well, I'm screwed, because then you basically have to sell the property, and then you have to go through the legal actions. So highly recommend not doing that. And then that's just a fair warning to don't bring that up to me. Don't tell me that, because then I'm like, no, then we're not doing this. Like, I'm not going down with you.
No, definitely not worth it.
But yeah, ultimately it is mortgage fraud. It is a federal offense, and you should not do that.
Good to know. I did know that. I just wanted to ask you so that the people, I'm not sitting here like, let's break laws. But,
what other questions are you getting?
Those are the big ones. I recently had like a pretty in-depth conversation with somebody who wants to buy a rental property, but they don't want to live there, but they don't want to put a ton of money down, but they want to use it as like, I don't know if they want to rent it out. So
Yeah.
we were just kind of like discussing those kinds of things. But a lot of the questions they had were about finances
I
because they know
know.
exactly where they want it to be.
Yeah.
So
And it's what was I gonna say? Like a year is not long. I know it seems long, like, oh, especially around New Year's when you're like, I'm gonna make all these resolutions, I'm gonna do it for the whole year. It seems so big. We go day to day. Like I would I just moved almost 4 months ago and it's gone like that. Like
yeah,
a third of the year gone.
no, it's true.
Things
Time
move
flies.
fast. And then just take the time to make that place better. If you're truly like, I want to make this a rental, just live the year. I mean, you need somewhere to live anyway. So take the year, renovate it, maybe make the value of the home better or uh, higher.
Yeah.
And rent it out after that. But just doing it the right way, a year is not long. And I know people are like, how many? And we also have a problem with like, I listen to Bigger Pockets,
Mm-hmm.
and you see people on social media and they're like, I bought 10 doors or 10 buildings or 10 properties this year alone. So you get that FOMO, you get that kind of like, what am I doing if I'm only doing one a year? Well, you're doing it the right way. And not saying they're not, but a lot of the times they're part of like syndicates and they're able to use other people's money,
Mm-hmm.
buy the property cash, do stuff like that, where they're
Yeah.
not using conventional loans and need, these government-backed loans. Like
Right.
when you're using these government-backed loans, you have to stick to the guidelines that are being requested of you. Well, not even requested. It's what you're doing. That is it. Like
Yeah.
so, yeah. And then yeah, that's what I have on that. I'm trying to think of anything else that I can go into more depth about.
No, I think
Um,
that's really good information too.
I think one more thing I did have is like pros and cons. When it comes to second homes, and Airbnb stuff like that. The ceiling, the income ceiling, is significantly higher. You are going to see much more return on your investment per month, and renting it out for weekends or days versus bulk pricing of a month.
Mm-hmm.
That is when you'll always see the higher income. But the pro on the other side to long-term rentals is leveraging the debt. And that's how you can. I mean, if you have the money for two properties, you could literally close on one, and if you qualify for the next one and have the funds for a down payment on another rental, you could do it. Like no one stops. It can stop you from continually buying rental properties.
Right.
It's the second homes that's almost a hard stop
Okay.
because you have to afford both homes, and you can't use the expected income.
Okay.
So those are
Yeah.
the pros of each, I would say.
Yeah. And you also want to take into consideration, all the overhead costs of like owning
Correct.
a home when you're going to have renters, whether it's short term or long term. If you have a short term rental, you need to consider everything that you're going to need to furnish the property.
Yes.
And typically that's several $1,000s, if not more. I've seen people do it but there's a ton of this stuff on TikTok. So if you guys are ever
Yeah.
need something to do for hours and hours and hours. There's so many TikToks on this, but I've seen people do it for like $2,000. I've seen people do it for like 20,000.
Yeah.
So it's all going to depend. And like, obviously, if you're trying to reach like a certain niche of people, like for example, like bachelorette parties, you're going to want to style it and that's going to probably be a lot more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to think about all the bills. When you're doing a long-term rental, sometimes you can get your renters to cover those costs for you, such as, uh, electricity, water, garbage, any of those things. You have to check with your county to make sure that, because I know some counties are a little bit weird and strict in the way that they operate things. But some you can just put all of those utilities onto the renter, where in a short-term rental situation, you're not going to be able to do that. You're going to need to cover all of those
Yeah.
yourself. So it kind of depends on what you want to do there.
Yes. The big thing is I've seen two people get properties down here, second homes, Airbnb. That furnishing, like no one accounts for that number. No one is prepared fully for what that number may look like. Things happen as you're putting it together. You're like, I want this, this, and this. That number extends. It's probably still going to be cheaper doing a 10% down payment and furnishing the place than it would be putting a higher down payment on a rental if that's
Mm-hmm.
what you want to do. So again, it's just it all comes down to personal preference and what you want to accomplish through real estate and what your just kind of what your vibe is and what you're wanting to accomplish. So they're both great options, and they both have been proven. I think though, when it comes to second homes and Airbnbs, there's a lot more market research you need to do.
Definitely.
Because like if you're like, oh, well, I want to get an Airbnb in Scottsdale, do you? Because there's like 6,000 here.
Yeah, you want to make sure that the
Super
market is not
saturated.
saturated.
Yeah,
for sure.
saturated, and people are actually going to use it. So
Yeah,
where we all know that there will be someone to rent your place at some time throughout the year that needs to live there long term.
mm-hmm.
So there's always going to be someone there. That's kind of where the lower ceiling is for the income.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I had something to say and I forgot what it was. Oh, and you definitely also want to make sure that you're just doing your research in general. Again, I think it was a reel the other day about the Nashville market, and it was a realtor who works with Nashville, and she's like, you have to be really careful because most, like 90% of residential properties within the Nashville zip code you can't even rent them out. Like they do not allow you to.
Yeah.
And if they do, there are certain like tax fees and extra financing things that you have to pay that people don't realize, and it's a lot more expensive, and that goes into your overhead.
Yep.
So it's important to be doing your research, and then like you said, you want to make sure that a market isn't overly saturated, because you want, at the end of the day, to be able to rent that property out. And if you're going to be doing long-term rentals, you have to think about property management. Do you want to do it yourself? Do you want to hire it out? Those are typically between like 8 and 10%, I think, at a minimum, to pay somebody else to be in charge of all those things for you. So.
Yep. 100%, and I'm glad you touched on that. I mean, I can think of down here, Sedona. Sedona was trying to pay people to keep their homes primary residences and not Airbnbs.
Wow.
It wouldn't have outweighed the amount of income they could make on an Airbnb, but they're trying to make it where it's not just this straight vacation spot where people live, so people can still, live there.
Yeah.
But there's so many things, and staying up to date on all this news is super important as well if you're trying to get through this. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think another important thing to think about is like at what threshold is it worth it for me? I've had conversations with agents in my office who say like, I'd rent my property out at like a $200 to $300 loss a month. So basically you're renting the property out for less than what you pay on your mortgage. And they're like, but it's 100% worth it because now I own a home for $200 a month. And that's it. So it's something to consider. You're still paying $200 a month on this appreciating asset. And then over time, you can always bump that rate up if you need to in order to start making money. But if you have to lose money at some point or another, you still have that appreciating asset in your name, and somebody else is still helping you pay that down significantly. And it's less out of your pocket. So it's not always about seeing the money that you're getting, but sometimes just thinking like long term, it's still helpful.
100%. Let's say that. And I've had multiple conversations with people about this now. Everyone wants that immediate cash flow, which, you should if that's what you're trying to invest your money. But the fact that, let's say the home appreciated it at a minimum of $12,000 through the year. So if you're taking a $200 loss on cash flow, you're still pro $800 a month. It's just that appreciation number is money you can't access yet.
Right.
So it just depends on how your mind works, what you like, and really what you can deal with. It's a lot of peace of mind, and also like not everyone wants to have a rental property because it's not peace of mind. You always have to worry about if you're going to be the property manager for your first property. Right. Yeah. You're on call. So there's just those little things to think about, that I still think it's an awesome thing, and I'm looking forward to when Kelsey and I can do it. But it's going to come with more stress, but more money, more problems.
Exactly. I know Ben and I are super excited to do it too. So one day.
Yeah. And if anyone is watching this now or later, if you have any other further questions, please reach out. I really like this stuff, and talking on, what's the best situation for you, what's the best route to go. Please don't be afraid to reach out to either of us and getting both of our opinions. But I'm always happy to help. So there's anything involving real estate, I would love to talk about.
Yeah. And if you are interested in buying in another state, I can't help you buy there specifically, but I have a ton of resources and agents
Mhm.
that can help in other states. And so if you want to buy a home in Arizona or North Carolina or Texas or wherever you think will be a good place to purchase a rental
Mhm.
property, reach out to me because I can definitely connect you with somebody that will be a good resource for you and can help you purchase a home there.
And then same for me if needing a loan. I actually have been able to connect with a lot of people around the country, so I'm sure I could connect you with someone in a state to be able
Yeah.
to help you out. So we had one question come in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how bad are rates on rental properties? So the actual rate isn't actually the biggest issue right now. Let's say if you were to buy a home at 10% versus 20%, you're probably looking today at a rate in the low sixes, maybe high fives, depending on how far you want to buy down the rate. Um, but for investment properties right now, we're really just, I mean, the bare minimum rate that is out there for conventional loans is about 7.125. So it's not significantly higher, but to get that rate, it costs a little bit more in upfront points. So it's the actual rate to rate and monthly payment probably is not going to be that big of a deal, but it's just the cost to be able to just do it. And the reason behind rates are just so high. Banks, it really is just the banks and then the government backing these loans. No one wants them right now because the market seems so iffy. We're going to get back into a better market when it comes to rates, but right now it seems very difficult. People are still doing it. People are still calling me, going, "I'd like to do this," and we look at it, and over the long term, it makes it still makes sense. And I told somebody, if you're going to buy a property and it's cash flowing now, my God, it's probably going to continue to cash flow and only get better from here. Like you're in the recent the recent history of like let's call it the last 5 years. This would be the hardest time to buy an investment property, but people are still able to find cash flowing properties. So if you can find one now, it's only going to get better.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
long-winded answer. Rates aren't too much worse. It's just the cost to get them is the hard part. Yeah. And I'd always be able to talk further about that. It's just hard when there we go. It's exactly what it is. I can't heard that plenty. Marry the house, date the rate. It's a very similar ideology when it comes to investment property. But and I'll say this since we're kind of on the topic. When it comes to real estate, my mind's always 5, 10 years down the road. I try to not think about the first year, 2 years, 3 years. I'm trying to think, how is this going to benefit me down the road? Someone's age is really going to dictate how far in advance their mind goes for investments. I'm still at a point where I can think 10 years down the road. So that's how I think. And that's why I'm still really interested in real estate and want to do this myself, regardless of what the news says and where interest rates are at. Because I know they're going to get better. Every winter, we know there's going to be a summer coming around in 6 months. That's kind of how I feel when it comes to the housing market right now. I'm not
Hmm.
too worried.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's proven what real estate does is it ebbs and flows, but it always flows back up. So
Yeah.
always.
But thank you for the question. That was
Yeah.
let
Great
me
question.
rant for a little bit.
Definitely. Yeah. Do we have any other questions or anything? And like we mentioned, if you do ever have questions or watching this back and think of one later down the line, you can reach out to either of us and both of us are happy to answer any questions or give any advice or whatever you're looking for. We're here as a resource for you. So,
Absolutely. Well, no more. I think we're good. I think
yeah,
we're good.
my
Yeah.
dogs are starting to lose it too. So, whoops. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining.
Yes,
We really
thank you.
appreciate it. As always, if you have any topics that you want to learn about, please send them our way. We are happy to talk about them. I think Caden got in touch with an appraiser that we're going to have on. Is
Yes.
that on here or TikTok or both? Or I'm not
We'll
sure. But
figure it out. It's still in the
okay,
works, but I'm really excited because this is something you and I have talked about is getting
yeah,
people on here, much like we had Brittany for title, and doing and just bringing in a little bit more of because appraisals right now, like it just seems like it's like I mean I understand it, but it's still one of those things where it's still a hurdle, and
yeah,
in every loan process. So if we can learn a little bit more about it, I'll have questions. So
Yeah, definitely.
I'll
It'll
work
be a
with.
really good one, I think,
I
for
think
sure.
so, and I'll work on some questions. I'll work and talk with her, and we'll figure out whether it's next week or the week after. We'll
Yeah,
figure something out.
perfect. But it'll be coming up, and I'm excited for that one for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Sweet. Well, thanks everybody again, and enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you all next Thursday.
Take care.
All
Enjoy.
right.
Bye.
Goodbye. Either
Yeah.
way. Sweet. Well, how's your Thursday going so far?
Thursday's going good so far. We got football. Football's
I
back today.
saw that. I don't know what football is, but
Go
just kidding.
sports. Go
Just
sports.
kidding.
Um,
Ew.
no, Thursday's good. Off to a good start. Got a little team meeting coming up here later, but no complaints here. But should get a little bit better talking rental properties. I know a lot of people
Yeah.
don't know about it.
Yeah. This will be a good one.
Yes. I guess how do you wanna how do we wanna dive in? I actually, funny enough, I made a YouTube video. I never posted it yet. I have it because I hate editing. But I did the exact thing of this conversation a few weeks back, so I'm primed and
Nice.
ready. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, if you have anything that you want to start off with, that's fine. I think most of the questions that I receive do have to do with like the financing side of things.
Mhm.
So maybe we can start off with that and then kind of go into what kind of things you want to look like. And then maybe like the money that you're making off of it, what's a good amount of money to be making.